When I sip on El Jefe tequila. Grab a bottle, stay COVID-free.
You are now tuned in to Check This Out News. We connect the streets. This is a Check This Out exclusive. Be sure to follow us on social media at Check This Out News on Instagram, YouTube, or join the party on Clubhouse.
It's your boy, Mike Johnson. We're here. Check This Out Live. You know how we do it. And with us today, we got a special episode. This is going to be called Black to the Future. And with us today, I got two outstanding titans in the field. One coming from the military, General Arnold Bray. And then with us on the business side, a pioneer in the game, an icon in his own right. This is Dr.GeorgeFraser with us today in the building. Man, thank you guys so much for joining us today on Check This Out Live. How are you guys doing?
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Right on. I'm going to dive right into it. The pandemic, we're right now coming up on a year from the pandemic. I know how it's impacted me personally. I've just written an article on LinkedIn. What are some of the vices that have happened, bad vices, habits that have picked up? It's been an interesting time, right? Relationship-wise, you have people that are single wanting to be with somebody, and then those who have been together, especially when we were under the quarantine or lockdown, whatever you want to call it, just fighting to get out. Interesting time. There's been a serious paradigm shift that has happened in society. But as a default or a byproduct of that has been the fact that I look at society and now we've entered into waves. First wave being the pandemic itself. The second wave being the fact that we had an economic crisis that has come on forth. And that's why we had the stimulus checks and more is going to be unfolding. Then we had Black Lives Matter. We've seen this from the untimely death of George Floyd to Breonna Taylor and countless others and how that has mounted. And now the fourth wave of this has been this ultimate cry for trust. And maybe that's the result of the last president, how society, especially young adults, have looked at government, looked at those in charge, and trust has been a big issue. And then the pandemic itself we've seen it, what it's done in terms of racism. And the world has been divided. We saw this new term called the essential worker versus the non-essential worker. And sadly, it's been exposed that the Black and the brown, those people of color, are really falling in line with the non-essential workers, the service industries. And there's a shift, drastic shift that's happening. The pandemic is affecting. I'd love to get you guys, both of your insights in terms of having some intellectual discourse. I'm looking at this as a face-off in terms of where do we stand? Where is Black America today in lieu of the pandemic? Now that we have the dividing line between the essential, non-essential, this reminds me back to the digital divide. He that has versus the one that doesn't have. And if you don't have, then you're going to fall in line with doing a service. If you do have, then you're in line with the essential workers.
Message.
I'm going to start with you, General Bray. What's your thought on that in terms of the pandemic and maybe the race of the state of Black America?
Here's what I think it's done. First of all, it's created a level of open hegemony within the Black communities, not necessarily where we're bonding to each other, but where we're starting to recognize some of the problems, and we're able to open up that discussion in every venue, at every level. The military, they're talking about it when it used to be under the table. That's the first thing. The second thing is it has exposed some of the requirements that we have to go into the future. We've taken utility now, we used to call the internet a utility, an option. We've now realized the internet is essential for us to be able to go to the future, and everybody's got to have it. I live in a area right now that's not a city, not a big city. So a lot of the kids come from places where they've got to have the internet. They've got to have access to it. And they're also realizing that they're not competing next door, but they're competing long range. And so all those things we talked about that were highlighted before, they're now amplified. And so we as a people now are able to talk about it in open venue because they saw it. So the pandemic has also made us, while it's made us in some ways stovepiped because of Zoom and other tools, it has also made us able to more quickly have communications.
Interesting. So it's almost in a sense, you have kind of an optimistic view in terms of the future of?
Yeah. What I'm saying is what we've done is we have taken things that were bubbling below the surface, and it has now brought Black and Black issues so that the different Black communities, because we're not a hegemonist community ordinarily, but now we recognize in some of those issues, and we are now attacking them more on the collective at every level in every industry, and we're bringing it to the forefront.
Interesting. Dr. Fraser, I love your version of that. What is your thought?
I love what the general said. I'm just going to put a shorter and finer point on it. COVID has us homeschooling, has us praying, has us spending time with family, being sober-minded, and it sounds like God is in charge here. And this is not a plague. This is an awakening.
Message!
And it is going to force us to think outside of the box as Black people, to use the incredible innovation and creativity that God has implanted in us. We're some of the most creative and innovative people on the planet. We're going to have to flip the script. We're going to have to do new things, and we're going to have to man up and woman up and tap into our excellence, because Black people cannot be mediocre. Only white people can be mediocre.
Hold up.
We saw that with Donald Trump versus Barack Hussein Obama. If Barack Hussein Obama had said or done 1/1000th of what Donald Trump had done, he would have been elected dog catcher in this country. So we have to be excellent. The world is changing. COVID has accelerated that change. And as a result of that, you're going to be remunerated. You're going to be paid at one level lower than your performance, right? Whatever you think you can do, we're now competing globally. You know, whatever you do, somebody in a garage can do, or somebody in their apartment can do. So we are going to have to be excellence. Mama told me many years ago, she said, Georgie boy, you're going to have to be twice as good to get half as much, because if you're Black and mediocre in America, you better leave, because you're going to be marginalized and you're ultimately going to be destroyed. So COVID has now forced us to look inside and upgrade our performance. Let me say that differently and then I'm finished.
Okay!
If you are average, especially as a Black person, if you are average in this country, you will live poorly. It used to be if you were average, you could live average. No longer. If you are average, you will live poorly. If you are good, you will live average. If you are excellent, you will live good. If you are amazing, you will live excellent. So you're going to be remunerated one level below your performance. So we have to, in these very interesting and tough times that are forcing us to think outside of the box, creating new businesses, working in a collaborative style, understanding the power and importance of networking and connecting the dots. That's economically and business-wise the key to our future success. We have to do it collaboratively, and we have to do it with excellence. We have no choice. And COVID has exacerbated this difference between what they can do and get over and what we can do and get over.
That part.
Mike, before you leave there, I want to hit Dr. Fraser with something, because his mom and my mom prepared us a certain way. The words that he used were the same ones at my kitchen table. But there's something that we had also within us called resiliency. And so while there was a level of competition, the dream was always bigger than that piece, because if you come in believing that you're going to hit that lower rung, you'll have a problem. You come in dreaming big. You always have to dream big. You always have to dream for exactly what you want to have. And then when you don't hit it, then you work harder to push it to the next rung. Because if you do, if they are not dreaming like you're dreaming, you will be mediocre. You have to dream for the highest levels possible. And that's got to be the goal that you go after. And that resiliency to fall and get back up and continue to fight.
Yeah!
One of the things that we're seeing happening is automation and robotics is on the rise. Dr. Fraser, I'd like to hear from you, your take on this. If a robot can do your job, a robot will take your job.
The war against the machines.
What does that mean for the state of Black Americans or Black people, period?
That means that if we don't create work and jobs for our people, we'll be out of work. You're exactly right. A robot will ultimately take our jobs. That is what happened to Black people in Detroit and wherever the manufacturing centers were in the world. Robots took those jobs. We're out of work. So we now have to figure out ways to employ ourselves. And so one of the things I've been talking about for at least a decade is that by the end of the 21st century, Black people must be the number one employer of Black people. We have to create work and jobs for our people because that's the only way to raise up the poor. And every immigrant group that has ever come to this country has understood that but Black people. Right? Jews are the number one employer of Jews. Asians are the number one employer of Asians. East Indians are the number one employer of East Indians. Arabs are the number one employer of Arabs. We have to be ultimately, over time, the number one employer of our own people. 96% of us have jobs. Nothing wrong with jobs. Nothing. In fact, my father, who's from Guyana, from the Caribbean, he preached to his 11 children, 8 boys and 3 girls, get a good education and get a good job. That was the focus, right? That is not what I taught my 2 sons, right? I taught them to get a good education and create a job, to create a job for themselves and to create a job for their children and to create work and jobs for our people. That's in fact what they're doing. So it's a mindset, it's a consciousness, and we have to preach and teach and model it, right? And we have to speak it into our people, and we have to do it endlessly because the key to learning is simplicity and repetition. We have to do it 50 different ways on 50 different days because if we're not careful, Mike, this is deep. Could it be when we critically review the upward mobility over the last 2 generations in America by cultural groups, that the Japanese and the Chinese are the new Europeans, the Koreans are the new Jews, the Hispanics are the new Negroes, and African American people will be seen as the new Indians.
Message!
Mic drop.
I don't want to pick it up, but I got you.
Powerful. I'm coming back with you, but General, I'd love for you, what is your response to that?
So the issue becomes now then, besides entrepreneurialism, where is the new horizon? The new horizon is going to be through areas of science, technology, engineering, and math.
That's right.
Right now, the richest guy that we have in America right now is Worldwide Technologies under Dave Stewart. Dave Stewart came from humble beginnings. He had the same talk that was given to you and I in his advancement. He's a fellow alum from UCM, so I'm doing a quick shout out. But what he also does is something different. He doesn't trade his company on Wall Street. And he said he doesn't need to. They need to come to him. The other thing he does, he's created St. Louis into his own technology center. They asked the question, well, do you have enough people there? He said, I can make enough people because he has the ability to dream and look at and realize that he can take people and advance them. See, because part of it is this understanding or the belief that there's a preparation level that sometimes we forget that we didn't start out with. So if you can get someone who is willing to dream, willing to move forward, you can get them prepared. But if someone said, what do I need to do to get prepared? I would say start to focus on the thought processes that go with science, technology, engineering, and math. And then the second part I would say is we got to think like animals. What is allowing the animal to survive in the future? They are teaming. So to your point about AI, we're going to have to figure out how to team against AI. We got to be like bees, where they can, with small brains, in fact, they can still figure out how to create a beehive better than the automation can create it in the right place because they know how to communicate.
Let me interject with that. The same question that I posed to Dr. Fraser, I now pose to you in a different context. If a robot can do your job, a robot will take your job. You coming from the military, high ranking at that, gone are the days of the little black boy, the little Mexican boy who says, hey, I can fall back and maybe just join the military. The military itself is becoming robotics. The human soldier, the physical soldier is being replaced by drones, automated technology, robotic technology. What do you say to if a robot can take your job, it can take your job? What do you say to that?
You have to do what I just said a while ago. One is you got to figure out what are those things, what is my thought process that gives me an advantage over a robot? It is a combination of 3 things. One is leadership. It's technology. It's being able to team. It is being able to share. It is having the logic to go with those unnamed jobs, because STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math, teaches you not what to think, but how to think. It also prepares you for a scientific methodology for addressing issues. And then the second part, it also teaches you to do, which is more important than everything else. Some people look for the answer, but the acumen of education is being able to develop the question that's appropriate to the problem. And so we've got to train our brains to be able to do that. We've got to realize that, learning how to work, if you will, those are just training jobs. Those are not careers. Those are not careers. And yes, there will be a preponderance of those jobs that we have that will disappear. But we've got to start focusing our young people on the ability to get inside the scientific methodologies, to go to the next level, and to dream what's next.
So how do we do that? I don't want to preach. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. I don't want to preach. I don't want to hear what some of the past civil rights leader and some what we got to do. How do we do it? And Dr. Fraser, you're kind of spot on a little bit. I'm going to turn it over to you. And what I'm going to do here is really close out with this in terms of the non-essential worker and what the pandemic has exposed. And then how must we be prepared to go into the future? Remember, this is Black to the Future. So I'm concerned right now, how do we upskill our people? Yesterday, Ngazi had told me about shootings in Columbus, Ohio, and the police department talking about we need a solution. The crime rate has gone up in LA, Chicago, and New York. Those are the big three cities. The crime rate has gone up within the Black and the brown community. And it has rippled into tier 2 cities, your St. Louis's of the world, your Cleveland. I'm sure the same effect is happening there. There's an uproar. There's something that's happening out here.
We have to attack this problem the same way slaves attacked their problem when they became free. What's the first thing slaves did when they became free? They began building small classrooms and larger schools. And then within 100 years, we had an entire historically Black college and university system. It all begins with education. It is the same way that I'm attacking financial illiteracy in Black America. We are the most financially illiterate people in this country. We are at the bottom of every single economic statistic that matters in this country. White wealth compared to Black household wealth is 20 times more than Black household wealth. So we have to fix that. Financial education is the issue. So I started a program called WINS, Wealth Building Centers and Curriculum. It's a system, a licensing arrangement where we install financial literacy programs in historically Black churches. Well, there's a parallel to that. Why cannot there be a system that is installed where Black people go in, which is the Black church, around STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math? We bring together kids who are learning programming. They're learning what all of this really means, because the most listened to, the most important leader in our culture is the pastor. This is who we trust.
Is that still true today?
That is still true today. That is still true today. I cannot think of a group of leaders amongst Black people, whether it's fraternities or sororities or the NAACP or the Urban League. I cannot think of an aggregate group of leaders. There are 85,000 Black churches. 10,000 of them, by the way, have wealth ministries. So yes, that's very true.
And the reason why I asked that and just sparking a question for you. Rapper Papoose out of New York, you're from New York. He said today's preacher is the rapper. And when I look at, and he happens to be a conscious rapper, one that I think you'd approve his lyrics. He's very much into it. Yeah, he's very much into consciousness, community activism, and all that good stuff. So when I hear this, he becomes the pastor Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and even Sunday night at any club USA.
Yeah, he is trying to reach that audience that is hypersensitive to that music, understands that music, can follow the cadences of that music, and can extract positive messages from that music. He is the exception to the rule. I mean, I love what he's saying, and I love what he's doing. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, of which he is actually effectively dealing with himself, is the answer to a question I get all the time. Dr. Fraser, what has happened to Black people? In the last 50 years, we've gone backwards. And I preface this by saying I want to say this and still be loved. But one of the things that happened to Black people over the last 40 to 50 years is we changed when our music changed. Do you know how important music is to Black people? Do you know the damage done by rap music in the early phases and stages of rap music, right? Enormous damage, right? And our wonderful psychiatrist, Francis Cress Welsing, said it wonderfully. You cannot continue to call yourself niggas, bitches, and hoes and expect to amount to anything, right? You cannot do that. We are the only people on the freaking planet that do this. We're the only people that call our women bitches and hoes, and we call ourselves niggas. Nobody else does this in the whole world but us. We are deeply wounded people. This must be fixed. And it will require education. It will require the modeling and the leadership of General and others like you, asking the tough questions and doing things, executing. We want progress without execution. I have a sign on my wall right here. When all is said and done, more will be said than done. We're talking it, but we ain't acting on it. We ain't doing it because our shit ain't changing. Right? And we have to fix that. No one's going to fix that but us. White people will not be fixing black people. It's been 400 years and we ain't fixed. We're going to have to do it. Man up and woman up and do it. Not only talk about it, but act on it.
Let me ask that. So in that same vein, you remember Michael Jackson, I think he might be the icon of saying, or the face of when bad became good.
Mm-hmm.
Who's bad? Remember the song, Who's Bad?
Yeah, oh yeah, bad. Right.
Now watch
That's
this.
right.
Watch this. I'm setting you up here. Watch this. It was white America that loved that and also embraced that, right?
Right.
Now they start, who's bad? He's bad. And then it's even the phrase, you're a badass.
Right.
Badass means you're a kick-ass. Badass might be the new word of excellence. Watch where I'm going now. Watch where I'm going.
No, let me tell you the new word of excellence. I'm gonna tell you the new word of excellence.
Yes, sir.
Gangster. Right? That's the new word of excellence.
You the boss. I got you.
All right.
I salute that. I salute that. Well, that's parallel. Yeah, absolutely. But where I was going with it, and I want to see your feedback, is one of the things that this culture, and you're a futurist, I'm going to address you as a futurist. We have the ability to turn, is it to commodify when they take away from us, said it was bad, and then they wanted our lips? Said it was bad and then they wanted our butt, to commodify, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's power in to turn a bad into a good. So it was the word who's bad, the word bad, and now that's a good word. Nigga, my nigga. We embrace that amongst each other. You can't say it, that those other people can't say it. Right. But we've embraced that. I hate to say this, but I got to ask you this question. We got some female artists out here that now hoe is a good word.
I mean, I don't know. It be too many hoes that be still mad at me from way back, like years ago.
Hoe is a good word. And the crazy part, the commodifying has happened. The soul train effect has happened. The white girls are saying the same thing. I saw the episode of Empire where the rich white family was checking a black business, but their daughter was listening to hip hop music, getting her game from hip hop music. So the bitches and hoes that you're speaking of, they're actually, that's home invasion, like Ice-T would say, because they're listening to the music in the home. It's in their iPods, it's in their cars, their mobile devices. So they're getting the same message. And because they heard it from Compton, because they heard it from Brooklyn, because they heard it from Cleveland, because the hood is everywhere, or North Carolina, I too must embrace it. So I'd love to hear your feedback on that, where you got a lot of these female artists, a lot of new class of female MCs who got the 9-inch, 6-inch nails, high heel, red bottom color hair. They're all bitches and hoes. It's now the thing. It's been embraced. They're now empowered by that. They've turned the nigger effect and use it on each other. I'd love your feedback.
General, you want to talk on that? I've been talking. Go ahead.
I'm going to just.
I'll add to it.
I'm going to pull him back for a second because.
In general, they all have millions of followers.
I got to pull you back real quick because here's the deal. There was in 1970 this group called The Last Poets. You may have heard that name before. The Last Poets.
The Last Poets. Okay.
They talked about all those things that Whitey, quote unquote, dug. And he talked about, I dug cool, I dug hip, I dug clothes, I dug music, I dug everything except freedom. And that's when I finally lost Whitey. We have flair. Our culture has a flair that is attractive. The problem is that one time our family set a foundation. You've heard the word Bible being used. We heard religion being used multiple times in this discussion. And then you asked a tough question. You said, is the rapper the new pastor? See, the problem is that the rapper can't be the new pastor. The pastor can rap, but he can't be the new pastor. Okay? And so what's important is that the foundation is the values that we embrace. And that's critical because that's what changes. You know, I heard something recently from a guy named Carl Mack. You know that name. And I know you know who he is. And he was, and he now has put on a crusade about the N-word and things like that. He talks about it. Emmett Till, the hundreds and thousands or thousands of Black Americans that were hung, the folks that was screaming at George Floyd that was on the ground, not the ones that was trying to get the knee off his neck. What do you think was probably some of the words, the last words he heard going through their ears before they died? It wasn't my man. It was probably the N-word.
That's right.
And so the question we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to accept that? Just because it is cool, that don't make it right. And we have to try to figure out how to turn this over. Quit, and use your other word, quit emasculating ourselves. Now I'll give it back to you, Brother Fraser.
We are deeply wounded people. We don't really even know who we are. We don't understand that we are the children of the slaves that would not die. That we have the genetic encoding of the great kings and queens of Africa, that we were building pyramids and solving complex engineering problems when other cultures were living in caves, eating each other. This is truth. We are God's first people. That's not hype, that's science, right? And in spite of the fact that America kept its foot on our throat, for 350 years, we overcame that and we rose like the phoenix. So if everything happens for a reason and serves us in some special way, and you will never understand that reason looking forward, and you will only understand it looking backwards, if in fact that is the truth. This is how I like to see us. Maybe we were not brought here. Maybe we were sent here. Do you believe that God would put his weakest people here to do his toughest job? How could an America who could morally, spiritually, and biblically justify the kidnapping, raping, and pillaging of another two people, natives already in America and Africans brought to America, have any moral or spiritual grounding? And perhaps had God not sent African people here, America might have self-destructed by now. Now, in so sending us here, what he has created is an aggregate group of Africans in America who are the best trained, the most moneyed, the most well-educated group of Africans on the freaking planet. So we cannot get where we need to go without Africa manning up and womaning up. They have 70% of all the most important minerals on Earth, and there's, on a per capita basis, they're still the poorest continent on the planet. So they cannot get where they're going without us, because we have the intellectual capital and the human capital to assist them in the ways that they need to be assisted. And they have the natural resources of which everyone else but them is fully exploiting. So we are a powerful people, but we are disconnected, right? And I talk about this all the time. We are disconnected. And so until we understand our power, until we understand who we really are as a people, until we connect the dots and leverage more effectively our collective resources and intellectual capital, and there is some incremental progress in that area, we're still not nearly where we need to be. Until that happens, and until we recondition our minds and understand who we are really are, and stop calling ourselves the N-word and bitches and hoes and all that, right? Until that begins to happen, and that will have to happen through education, training, discipline, and obedience, and our parents passing this down as they did to the general and I. I got this from my parents. My father was a strict Caribbean, right?
Right, I know that.
Right, no question about that, right?
Yes.
And he would take no crap.
Yes.
Right? Whatever you were told to do, you had to do. You had to do it with excellence. You
God.
You were disciplined and you were obedient. I got this at home, right? Many of our children are not getting this at home. So we have to keep preaching and teaching this gospel. We have to go within, and we have to coalesce around our vision and not just our pain. And we have to have a new cultural vision. That's really what we must have, right? And we have to focus on making Black people great first, making Black people great first. We have to learn, earn and return. We got a lot of us learning, a lot of us earning, but not enough of us returning. Therein lies the problem. The general and I return. There are many that return, but they're not most. All right. So we have to work on getting more returning that's learning and earning. That's how it's going to be done. We have to model the behavior that we expect from our children, and we have to return and teach them and help them and provide the education that they will need. It's no more complicated than that. So the question is, who is going to man up and woman up and do that? At the Power Networking Conference, we have 6 goals that we give to Black people every year. And I'm not going to talk all 6. I'm just going to talk one. Here's one goal that we demand of the 1,500 top Black professionals, business owners, and community leaders that come to our conference every year. Save one child other than your own. Now, if you ain't doing right by your children, you're out of this equation. Now, when I say save one Black child other than your own with a special emphasis on Black boys, what I simply mean is get that child in and out of high school without a criminal record, without a baby, and with a high school diploma. I didn't say send them to college. I said get them out of high school, right? Without a criminal record, without a baby, right? And with a high school diploma. You do that single thing alone, you will lay the foundation for the rest of their life. Save one child other than your own. And if there's 46 million Black people in this country, at least 5 million of us are doing well enough to move beyond saving and doing right by our children to find one child. And let me tell you something. It's going to be right in your own extended family. You don't even have to look very far. You're going to have a brother or sister that ain't doing right by their own damn children. Save them, right? One child other than your own.
I love it. I love it. General Bray, I want to close out with you on this series, this part of the series that we have going on, Black to the Future. What are your closing remarks?
I'll take off from where we just left. There is this belief that we have to have somebody to enable us, but we've got to first of all do exactly what I said before. We've got to first of all start to fix us internally. Louis Farrakhan talks about it. I think our brother Fraser calls him the perfect African American because he's free.
Yes.
I believe his brain has been freed. I think we've got to do the same thing with ourselves. We've got to go forward. One of the things you didn't talk about, but you wanted to talk about, I know this, is, and I talked about teaming. It's associated with, the value of frats, the value of sororities, the value of Masonics. I talked about team. We've got a team to go forward. All of those organizations have fundamentally good roots that are biblically sound. And what makes them different from gangs is they're wedded to the foundation, not to the guys who wander off and go do bad things or want to do bad things. It's rightness. And so those things will help us also work toward womanhood, manhood, and trying to make sure that we don't get caught up in the things that become fashionable and are not timeless, because the future is about principles that are enduring and will last. That's what we've got to be ready to do. Stay with those enduring principles as we go. And again, hey, this has been great. I always love talking to Dr. Fraser. And for all those folks out there thinking the military is an option, I'm going to share this with you. Only 3 out of 10 high school graduates right now can even join the military because of either drugs, crime, or education. So if you're not fighting that fight that Brother Fraser talked about, you can't even have that option anymore.
Right.
So again, thanks very much, Mike. Always great to talk to you guys.
Absolutely. I want to thank both of you guys for taking time out today. This is Mike Johns, Check This Out News. You know how we do it. Connect the streets. We out.